this Lego figure we're going to do Robin. I've got my Lego figure little templates that I cut out so that it's to the size I'm after. So we're going to start by making his body pieces. Now usually we make the legs in one piece, but because Robin's got 2 different colours within his legs, we're going to make it in 2 pieces. So we're going to first of all just roll this so that it's still reasonably thick, but so that it's got a flat surface. And what I'm going to do is cut around so that we've got the basic size for the bottom of our legs. Okay. So I've gone around the template as I would normally, and I'm going to mark on this band here, which you'll see is red on here, and then this line here, and then we're going to cut just either side of the centre. This is where sometimes I end up a little bit wonky, and I do apologise if I keep putting my head in the way. Okay, so for this one what we're going to do is cut that top band off now, and we'll replace that with a red band. So we've got our 2 legs, and I'm just going to put lines on where the feet would go, across there like that, and I'm just going to flatten this bit out just a little bit in the middle of each one. Just make sure they both are the same height. Move that down there so you can see what I'm doing, and just trim that bit off on either side. Just make sure his feet are flat at the bottom. So what we're going to do this time is roll this so it's similar thickness to that one. I'm going to put my template on, and we don't need very much of this. So I'm just going to cut out so I've got the width from across the top, and then I'm going to mark on where that band comes to. Okay. And then I'm going to put a line where that band is on the top, that top bit. Okay. And then I'm going to cut so that we've got a piece in the centre that the legs will go either side of, and then I'm going to cut just under that band bit that we made, and then we'll remove it all. You should be left with that shape. Now you might find it easier to make all the legs in one colour and just add a bit of red over the top, so whichever way you prefer. And then you're just going to add the legs like that. Okay. So I'm just going to add a tiny bit of water just to stick them in place. Like that. So I've just cut a really small piece of greaseproof paper, baking paper, and I'm just going to put his legs onto there just so that they don't stick while they're drying. Okay. So next we're going to do his body. So taking a bit of red again, as before, you're going to roll it out so it's the same kind of thickness as we used for the legs. I'm going to cut round. Okay, and just make sure it fits against your body. Now you'll see mine isn't thick enough, so I'm going to redo that just quickly. So I've made my body a little bit wider there so it fits a little bit better against his legs. I'm going to make the arms next, so you need your green out again. And we're just going to roll the sausage shape, long thin bit, and hold it against the body and cut. So it's just short the body, and then you need to do the same again. Put it next to the other one so you know that you've got them the same size. Okay, I'm just going to pinch the shoulder bits in just a tiny bit, and then I'm just going to, with the back of my knife, put an indentation where I want the elbow. Okay. And I'm just going to stick these with a bit of water onto the side of the body. Position them where you want them to go. I'm just going to have mine pretty much by his side like that. Or you can have one further back if you want one further back. Okay. So onto the head next. So taking your fondant, I've just made mine a flesh colour, possibly a little bit too much there. Roll the ball, hold it between your fingers and squeeze like that so you've got the right shape for the head. Hold it against your little template just to make sure it's roughly the same size, and again against your head to make sure you're happy with it. So taking my flesh colour again, I'm just going to roll that out a little bit. Taking a circle cutter, give myself a little circle, which I'm going to stick under his head for the neck. So I'm just going to push that down a little bit like that, trying not to move his head too much out of shape. Just squash that down a little bit because it was a bit too tall, I think, for what I needed. Okay, so that's the right size now for what we need. And what I'm going to do is put a little bit of water on the top of his legs and a little bit on the bottom of his body, and I'm going to I'm not putting them together just yet, I'm just going to leave that a minute or two while I do the hands so that it's got time to kind of go a little bit tacky so that it sticks together better. So I've got a bit of black now for the hands. Now it's quite soft, is this black one, so it is a bit more difficult to shape. I'm just going to pull that round into a little hand shape like that, and then just put it down to dry. Same again for the other hand. Just put them next to each other so you can see if you're happy that they're close enough to matching size wise. And next I'm going to do him a cape, a yellow cape. So again, I've got my modelling flour paste, just because it dries a bit firmer than normal fondant, especially when you're rolling out thin things like his cape. So for his cape, I'm just going to cut a slight curved line that's going to be the bottom of the cape like that. And I'm just going to move this around next to it so I can see size wise, because I want it to be so that it's not quite touching the floor. So I'm going to do it to about there, I think. Okay. It doesn't need to be really wide. It needs to be a little bit wider than him. So I'm going to start to curve it down there, around like that, and the same at this side. Curve it and bring it down. Now if it's too wide, you can always redo it. So I'm just going to put the body on here just to see size wise. Now I think it's actually going to be a little bit too long still. So I'm going to take a little bit off this shoulder here. If you want to cut yourself out a template for these, you can, especially if you've got any little Lego figures at home, then you can remove one of their capes and draw around it to make yourself a little template from that, which makes things a little bit easier. And what I'm going to do is put a tiny little triangle out of the top of that where we're going to move it round. So what I'm going to do, and careful if you touch the bit that you put water on because it will have gone a bit tacky, is just make sure your greaseproof paper is clean. So I'm going to put my cape on there and I'm going to put the top of my body like that. I'm just going to put a tiny bit of water behind it so it sticks in place where I want it to be. A little bit of water on the top of the body. And I'm going to move this so it touches the top. And again, same with the other side. And pick it up and move it on like that. And I'm just going to squash it down just a little bit. Now, it's looking like it's a bit of an angle at the bottom, so I'm just going to cut a little bit of my cape off of that side like that. And then I'm going to take my feet and attach my legs onto there, like so. Just pushing them on to make sure that they are attached properly. Now it might be that you want to put internal support and a little cocktail stick or a piece of spaghetti up through the centre. If you want to do that, that's absolutely fine. So just keep positioning it until you're happy with how it is. So I want my cape to fold just a tiny bit more just down there, like that. Careful that you don't squash the hands like what I have done when you're moving the rest of it about. I'll just try and put them back in shape. Okay. Then when it's all done, I'll put the head on top of the cape. So what I'm going to do is just create a little flat bit at the top of the cape for when I stick his head on. But I don't want to stick his head on just yet because I find it easier to put his hair on first and then stick it on. So we're going to leave that to dry now before we move on to the next bit of him. So Robin's now had a little bit of time to harden, just so that when I'm decorating his body, it's going to make it easier for us to stick things on there. We're not going to have to worry about sticking fingerprints and things in. So I've got a bit of yellow that was left over from his cape. And what I'm going to do is roll that like so. And I'm just going to roll it out nice and thin. Now I hope you can see what I'm doing okay, because I zoomed in a bit to see if that would help with it being so small. Okay. So his belt curves in a little bit, but what I'm going to do, cut that bit off there, is I'm going to cut in to the strip like so. So you'll see I've got an ever so slight sort of kink in it. And we'll round that off a little bit when it goes on the figure. I'm going to take a little triangle out of the bottom, and then I'm going to go, sorry, there's another aeroplane flying over. That's what the noise is. So I've just done that again at the other side. Okay. So what I'm going to do is stick that, just using a little bit of water, across his body here. So I'm going to put that on there like so. Okay. And I'm just going to shape it a little bit with my tool so that it's got a slightly rounded edge. And I'm going to pinch it in that middle bit just a little bit. So if you haven't cut it to the perfect size and shape, don't worry, because we can alter it a little bit on here. And if you think you've cut the belt a bit thick, don't worry, you can just cut some off while it is on the body. Now I've cut a bit off the top, which means it has now left me with two separate bits, but they're a little bit thinner than what they were before, so I'm just going to curve them round Just a little bit, like so. Okay, and trim that bit off the edge. Now it's got a round bit in the centre as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put indentations in for these lines. You can either do it with a knife or with your modelling tool. So I'm just going to go down like that for the lines that are in the belt, trying to make sure that your belt doesn't lose its shape when you're doing it. Okay, and what we'll do is I'll put a little line at the top and at the bottom. Like so. So his belt is starting to come together a bit more now. So we're going to roll the yellow again, and just using a round cutter I'm going to cut a little round circle for the centre of his belt. And just put a bit of water there where I want it to go, and then I'm just going to pop that on there like so. Now mine's a little bit bigger than the one in the picture, so if you prefer you can have it a bit bigger. If you want to change it, you can roll it by hand rather than using a cutter and press it on. So whichever you find works best for you is fine. And what I'm going to do is indent the centre just a tiny bit with the bottom end of my paintbrush like that. Okay. Now what I'm going to do next is put a little bit of painting on. So I'm using my black food colouring and a really fine brush, and I'm just going to run a line up either side of the belt, just really fine line. You can use a pen if you've got an edible pen instead. Okay. And then I'm going to try and put one on the inside of his belt buckle. This is where it might not end up very circular. Okay, so it's not the neatest of painting, but it's quite fiddly with it being quite small. Okay, so now what we're going to do is run a line up the centre for the middle of his suit, like so. Okay. Then he's got a slight line under his chest at either side. Now you might not be able to see it on the picture very well, but it's quite faint, but I think he's got just a little line there and there. And then he's got little lines across here. Like so. So what we're going to do next is put his little yellow stitch lines on his front. So I'm going to roll the yellow out again. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. I'm just going to cut a strip of it to the width that I want these little stitching bits to be. Okay, and then I'm just going to cut out, he's got 4 there, we might struggle to fit 4 on, but we'll see. We'll cut 4 anyway, just in case. So 1, 2, 3, 4. If you can't fit them on, don't worry. So we'll start with one at the top. Now if you do put water on, just be careful that you don't smudge the black line that you've put on. So I'm going to push that on there. I'm going to try and pick these up with my paintbrush because they're very fiddly and they end up stuck to my hands. Now my yellow bits are a bit bigger than the ones on the picture. So if you can make them smaller, make them smaller. So that last one just doesn't quite fit on. I think I'm pushing it a bit too much to get that on. So I'll just move these down a tad, space these out a little bit. Like so. My line's starting to disappear a little bit in the middle, so I'm just going to put a bit of paint back in there like so. Now You can leave them as they are, or he's got a bit of black around the edge, so it's up to you whether you want to try and paint black around the edge. You might find that actually you just want to leave it just yellow. Okay. Then we need to put a little letter R on now. If you haven't got space, don't worry. You can just not put it on. Let's see if we can squeeze one on. If not, we'll just leave it off. Sometimes, if it doesn't look right, I won't bother adding things. So I'm just going to roll a bit of yellow fondant. And I'm just going to see if I can make a really tiny little R like that with it. Or you might want to turn it this way. Okay, so it is really tiny. And it still might be too big for his body. So we'll see when we put it on. So it's a bit of a squeeze on there. I'm going to push it on with my cocktail stick. Like so. Just make sure it's stuck with a bit of water. And my letter R isn't quite in the same style as that one, but with it, oh, the yellow thing stuck to me. With it being so small and fiddly, I struggle to get it exactly the same. So I'll just patch that one up where I've just caught it. And then I'm just going to put a little bit of black around the edge of my letter R. Like so. And then I think he's got a bit of black in the background. If you can't get that on, don't worry. So what I'm going to do now is give him a face and some hair, and then we'll add his hands on last. So he's starting to take shape a little bit now. So I'm going to take a bit of white, and I'm going to get some green again. It's the same colour that we've used on his body that we can use for a mask. We only need a tiny bit. So taking a little bit of white, what I'm going to do is roll a thin, just a really thin bit that I'm going to put, in fact, we'll start again with that. We'll do 2 small round bits that will stick on for his eyes. We're just going to press those onto his face, like so. And you can squash them down so that they become a bit more oval shape. Don't worry too much if they're not the same size, because what we're going to do is put his mask over the top. Hopefully, that's what we're going to do. Okay, and again for his smile, I'm just going to take a tiny, tiny bit of white, and we're just going to add that to his face. Like so. Okay, and we'll paint around his smile, but what we'll do is we'll add his mask on first. So we're just going to roll the green nice and thin. We don't want it very thick at all. Okay, and what I'm going to do is use my circle cutter to cut out 2 circles so that it leaves us with this kind of shape, which doesn't look very mask-like at the moment. And you'll find I'm getting fingerprints in it all over. But that's the centre of our mask, and then we'll cut out a little bit further round. So what we're going to do is cut across like that on either side. I'm going to do the same at the bottom, like cut it a little bit higher up. At the moment mine's quite a wide mask still, so we'll probably need to cut it down a little bit further. So that's my basic mask, and what I'll do is I'll just hold it over there to see how it fits. So it's a bit big really, is this one, so we'll try to cut it down a little bit. See if I can squash it in size that way, just a little bit. So you'll see as I start doing things, I change what I'm doing as I go along. This happens a lot when I'm modelling things. Now, it does get a bit fiddly with his mask with it being so small. It's getting a little bit closer to what I need it to be, I think. Just gonna play around with the arch bits on it a little bit. Now for the eye holes, they are going to be quite difficult, so what I'm going to do is just try poking a cocktail stick in and waggling it around just a little bit like that. Now you'll find the mask might start changing shape a tiny bit as we do this. But we'll move the mask around a little bit when it's on the face as well. So we've got it done basic for the time being, so what I'm going to do is put a bit of water between the eyes and around the white bits, not too much on the white bits of the eyes. Okay, and just make sure it's central, and then we're going to move that around a little bit when it's on the face. Now if you prefer to paint the mask on, you can paint the mask on. So I'm just going to try shaping it round just a little bit when it's on the face. Yeah, with his mask, unfortunately, I don't have an easy way that I find to do this. Okay, so that's about as close as I think I'm probably going to get it now with his mask. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put his head on his body. Now I'm going to put it on a little cocktail stick to make sure it is held in place properly. And I'm going to paint around his mouth, and what I'm going to do then, add his hands and let him dry before adding the hair. So, taking a cocktail stick, again you can just stick it on with water, you don't have to have a cocktail stick. I just find it gives them a little bit extra support, so put that through. I'm going to mark how high I want it to go, so I only want it that big, so I'm going to cut it. I'm going to turn it round so that the point bit is now pointing upwards, like so, and I'm going to see if I can get his head. Now if you're finding it goes into the body instead of into the head, pierce the head first, like so. I'm just going to put a bit of water where the head's going to join. And you're then going to put that on like that. Okay. So I'm taking some black colour in. We're just going to gently or carefully paint around the mouth. Now you might find it easier to paint the white bit on if you prefer, rather than sticking it on as additional piece. Okay, so he's got quite a big smile as our Robin. Then if you want to, you can go around the edge of his mask. If you prefer to leave it, then leave it. Okay, so we've gone around that, and we'll let that dry before I do his hair. So I've taken a small amount of black fondant now. We're just going to add his hands, so probably don't need quite as big a ball as that. So I'm going to roll 2 small balls. I'm just going to put a bit of water at the end of each of his arms and also at the back of his hands. Okay, what I'm going to do then is put the little black balls of fondant we just rolled at the end of each arm. Stick a bit of water on the end of them, not too much, only a tiny bit. Then we're going to push the hands onto the arms, like so. Now I think I've just pushed my arm off a little bit, so make sure you don't press too hard that you lose an arm. Okay, so he's going to dry again now before adding hair. So Robin's mask has had a bit of time to dry now on his face, which means we should be okay to add him some hair. So I'm just going to use some black fondant for the hair. I'll start with a ball of fondant, which I think might be too big initially to start with, but I'm just going to pinch it all the way around the sides, and I'm just going to hold it against his head so I can see how much of his head it takes up. So you'll see, kind of looks like he's got a funny hat on at the moment, so it might be just a little bit too much still, so we'll pinch a little bit off and we'll do that same process again. So we're going to pinch around the edges a little bit, and I'm going to hold it against his head. So when you're happy that it fits roughly around his head, what I'm going to do is wet the top of his head and just a little bit round the back with some water. Okay, and I'm going to hold that onto there like that, and I'm going to push it on all the way around. Like so. So his hair doesn't look very good just yet, but we're going to mould it round a little bit. So taking a modelling tool, you can start to push in where his hair goes. So I'm literally going to push some bits up and try and gently pull some bits down to shape the hair. Now they tend to have little gaps at the side where the ears would go, so I'm going to clear a little gap around there like that. And the same at this side, you might find them difficult to hold, so I'm going to push a little ear hole in, if I don't drop it, like that. I'm going to take a little bit off there because it's quite long. And I'm going to try and push it so that it matches, so it comes quite close to his mask on the sides. I'm just going to put indentations in for his hair. Now I don't know if you can see it very well with it being on black. I'm just putting some lines into the hair. Now my Robin looks a bit like he's got a bob at the moment. So we'll try and make it look a little bit shorter by adding some shorter lines nearer the front. Okay. So you just do that until you're happy with his hair. So I think I'm reasonably happy with it like that. So that's it then. Let's pick it up. Robin is finished. So thank you for watching. If you want to see what I do with all of these little Lego figures even, I can't speak, do have a look on my Facebook page where you'll see all the cakes and things that I do put these on. If you did enjoy the video, please do subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.
If you liked this video and would like to see more, please click on the images of the other videos suggested. Also, please do subscribe to my channel using the button at the bottom right hand corner of the screen. You can also visit my cake website and my Facebook page to see more cakes and ideas.